All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Conscious Body Conversations. I am your host, Jessie Lucas of Embodied Movement Training, and here for another episode today with a long time dear friend of mine, Natalie Baack, who is a body-led life and health coach. And she is also the co-founder of Madrona Integrative Health Centre on beautiful, and I know it's beautiful because she posts the most beautiful pictures, Salt Spring Island in British Columbia, Canada. So when I first met Natalie, I can't even count how many years ago, but it's been a lot of years. We connected in, I believe, a Facebook group, and there were some conversations going on around how to show up in your work and really recognizing what it is to really, be your authentic self. In, are you single? Are you partnered? Are you dealing with these health issues? Are you, what are, and when we finally connected on the phone, we realized we both kind of integrate in this place, my work coming to a holistic perspective, an embodied perspective on health and being in your body through movement. And Natalie had a very parallel approach, exploring her own journey, her own personal journey, and then has taken it into a professional journey as well, of exploring your authenticity, her authenticity through relationship with food and how that relates to embodiment and empowerment and all of these other nuanced threads that stem off of that. So I am so excited to be hearing from you, Natalie, and having this conversation today. If you've been following along the series, you know that we are touching on some topics, kind of bringing the inside out as far as creating new paradigms in these fields in wellness so that we can support embodied journeys. So with that, Natalie, thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to you. Would you please tell us a little bit more about yourself, your story? And I'd love to dig into this pocket of how to explore things like embodiment and empowerment through your relationship with food. So tell us.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me here. It's so good to be here with you. Gosh, where to start? I guess I'll start at the beginning of my journey, really, having been sort of like a chronic dieter for 20 years, and then working for 12 years in the film industry in a very belly of the beast, intensely stressful, ego-driven, male-driven world, ending up really burnt out and feeling disconnected from myself, feeling unwell, starting to feel really unwell in my body, both from a health perspective and a physical health perspective and a mental health perspective. And every time I would try to stick to a diet, I lived in LA, there was all sorts of pressure around having to look a certain way, which wasn't, curvy plus size. Then I was just at this point where I was starting to feel unwell and also still struggling with, how do I stick to a diet? And the question really came up for me of, I feel like I know what to do, but I'm not doing it, and why. And as somebody who's chronically dieted, those out there might understand what I'm saying, where it's everything there is to know about nutrition at this point. You don't really need to study nutrition or health coaching from that perspective. And one thing led to another, and I found my way to the Institute for Psychology of Eating, and really resonated with what they were teaching there, because it was really so much more led by Mark David out of Boulder, Colorado, really getting into the how and the why of eating, and what's happening in our bodies. So immunity, digestion, fatigue, as well as weight gain and weight loss. And what I sort of came to along that path of exploration, and what it opened up a can of worms for me around was that stress was really the primary issue in my life, not calories. And then I got very heavily involved in body positive activism, fat activism, and realized that diet culture and the way that we relate to food, the way that we're taught to control ourselves or be controlled around food, is just causing like widespread eating disorders, disordered eating across the world, and wrecking our relationships with our bodies and ourselves. And I was also having health challenges, and I sort of came up with this theory as a result of this program, that if not listening to my body is how I ended up sick and lost in my life. What if I listened to my body? Could I find my way back to health, both physically and emotionally and mentally? And could I find my way back to the path that I maybe was meant to be on, that I didn't know that I had lost myself on until things sort of started falling apart around me? And after 10 years in this career, I was like, this is not the life I want, having no clue as to what life I actually wanted, right? So that's sort of how I'd say about 8 years ago, I sort of started down this path into embodiment. Was, if being out of my body or not knowing how to listen to my body or how to connect to my body is what's been making me sick, then if I start to learn how to listen to it, and it started, in the probably through the doorway of like intuitive eating, and then has led into like, not just intuitive living, but really body-based living. Because I feel like intuitive is so much more like up here, right? And we're still listening for like other influences, experts, guides, ancestors, psychic influence when we say the word intuitive. But let's drop down into our human bodies, right? And actually start to listen to like, what is the felt sense? What is that asking for?
Let me,
Yeah.
before we segue into that part,
Oh.
I love how you just brought intuition, the way that you were just describing it. I want to kind of label it somatic intuition. Can we like make that term right now together?
Yeah, I like it.
That felt sense. I know, and I'm going to kind of back up into a question, and then I want you to pick it up. That's where I want you to pick it right back up. But that, I think, in the world of embodiment, in trying to kind of, I think embodiment is one of those terms, kind of maybe like mindfulness was about 10 years ago, where it was only some quirky nerds kind of talking about it. And now we have mindfulness moments in, the lower grades in schools, that we're teaching it. And I think embodiment is on that path now to kind of start to pick apart and understand, what does embodiment even mean? What are some of the concepts? How do we achieve it? What are the results? How, what are all the facets of it? And so I think understanding, being intuitive with our body practices, especially eating, feeding this body, having that be a felt sense, something really grounded in your body, is a really important way to understand that. So I wanted to just kind of like shine a flashlight on that, because that was really, really brilliantly put. But so in order to bring us into kind of like, what does that mean and how do we do it? I know this is one of the things we connected on when you had this wisdom from IPE, the Institute of the Psychology of Eating. It must have been about 8 years ago, because you were making that transition out of the Hollywood industry scene and into
I was
your
on the
own
Paramount lot when we had our first conversation. I was working at Paramount. Yeah,
that's right. You were in the Paramount parking lot.
Very long lunch.
I remember that. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, what a day that was.
Yeah.
But so one of the things you said, you had this moment of questioning of, if not listening to my body, led me down this path. And I remember you describing to me some of the health issues you were
Mhm.
going through. And I love that it led you to this highlight of, calories were not the issue, stress was the issue.
Yeah.
That is, if anybody has a takeaway from this, that's probably one of the big ones.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that that might be one of the biggest roadblocks of, you know, whether it is a weight issue or a health
Mhm.
condition like a stress related health condition
Mhm.
or a hormonal imbalance,
Mhm.
or I mean we could go on and on here.
Yeah. I mean,
But
it all starts with, well, it doesn't all start with stress. I've learned recently there's a lot of neurological stuff that contributes too. I was just diagnosed with ADHD 3 months ago at 40 or 39, turning 40. And that's been a huge also added insight to specifically like relationship to cravings, dopamine,
mm,
you know, like since I started on medication, that was like slight tangent, but since I started on medication, like I've stopped grazing entirely because I'm not looking for those dopamine hits, so it's like, but essentially what this gets at is our relationship to food is a doorway
mm,
back to ourselves, right? In many different ways. It really depends on the person. Um, and so for me, what did intuitive eating really mean? um, where are those cravings coming from? How do I know if it's something my body really wants or if it's just something I'm craving, you know? Um, and there are so many things, especially as women in this world, but really for everybody, that distract us away from our intuitive selves. Let's call it somatic intuitive and psychically intuitive selves, right? We are constantly told to listen to authority outside of ourselves. I mean, that's what diet culture is. It's this expert has the answer to your pain. Um, and so coming back to that is really about like learning how to listen to your needs in any given moment and trust yourself that your needs are accurate, you know?
yeah.
And the stress element, I mean, it's just stress has a cascade across all layers of health. Um, and so what I started to do in my life is realize like stress was the problem. So um, if I could change my lifestyle and um, decrease my stress, then I might have a fighting chance at like losing weight, which is at the time what I really desired. I'm at peace with fluctuations in my body at this point. Um, but and knowing that those fluctuations happen because of stress. I mean, look at these conversations with COVID weight, like, and now everybody's like, gotta diet your COVID pounds off, and it's just we put on weight because we were stressed because we were all in a collective trauma response and our cortisol's firing, like, and then it causes like a cascade of hormone imbalances and nutritional deficiencies and all sorts of things. And like, how could we possibly think that this is an individual willpower issue? Like, that's where we then create another stress called like self-criticism. And then we start to go to war with ourselves. So when I think about bringing people back into an empowered, intuitive relationship with food and their bodies, what I am hoping to do is help people really come from a space of choice and agency, around every choice that you make, everything that you do, um, and self-trust. So one of the hardest things that I've had to do over the last 8 years is know that I'm having health issues, but give myself full permission around food. It's
Mm,
like so much cognitive dissonance, right? But if I didn't give myself full permission to break away from diet culture, and let's say it also comes into movement and fitness culture, um, I wouldn't have been able to get back to my sort of sovereign sense of choice.
yep.
And sometimes my body will get to a point where like it doesn't give me a choice. it's like you can't eat these things or you feel like absolute crap, like to the point where, you know, you're in pain rocking on the couch and can't go to work, you know. And then there's some different levels of choice that have to come in around what I'm eating right now, you know. But I'm never going back to an external decision maker around what I'm putting in my body. And there's always, so to me, it's like the core concepts for me are permission, and presence.
Mm. I love that. That this moment of cognitive dissonance that you're describing, I see that same thing show up in a lot when we're talking about embodiment, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what thread you're coming in from, it's this disconnection, this dissociation where something that is internally feels very true.
Mm-hmm.
This is me, this is my sovereignty, this is my authenticity, does not match some sort of expectation, maybe that's been ingrained, absorbed,
Yeah.
assimilated. It may still feel like, oh, this is mine, but or it's come from some other, something comparative. And I think that this is where this kind of self-responsibility of, okay, you got to, learn what works for you, what doesn't, food
Yeah.
wise, you got to, make these conscious decisions. But that permission piece, I believe we can take so much of the stress, the friction, the struggle
Mm-hmm.
off of
Yeah.
that permission piece when we create frameworks
Mm-hmm.
that are more accepting, that are more exploratory, that are more open, where it's not, those rigid
Yeah.
expectations of, when you took that long lunch at the Paramount to
Yeah.
talk to me, like you're going to eat when your lunch break is,
I
and
didn't.
not, even like
Yeah.
timing of your eating and all
Yeah.
of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I understand, our lives need flow. And when we're working with other people, whether it's within a family unit or,
Yeah.
profession or whatever, things got to work together. There's got to be some coordination to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that these structures have been so rigid that they formed what food is available, when is it available, what is okay to eat and when, and, and the consumption of that within that rigid structure, I
Yeah.
can only imagine for, if you have a little thing that's off, a little bit of dissonance, it's
Yeah.
just going to amplify that dissonance. So that it's so fascinating that you had that moment to even just the light bulb go off and
Mm-hmm.
ask, like, what are the changes I can make to create a less stressful environment
Yeah.
for me to start processing these foods, these body decisions
Yeah.
in more peaceful and easy ways. So if
Mm-hmm.
if someone is listening and they are for the first time recognizing
Mm-hmm.
that there is even dissonance,
Yeah.
if they like even that light bulb
Yeah.
going off,
Yeah.
what do you have to say to that? What from your journey, because you've walked this walk, you've
Mm-hmm.
danced this dance,
Mm-hmm.
what are some
Yeah.
of those first steps somebody can do to create peace
Sure.
and ease around their relationship with food and come to a more
Yeah.
embodied and empowered
Yeah. Yeah.
place through that?
Well, it's really interesting too, because I'm starting to have these conversations again. You know, I sort of had gotten away a little bit from coaching around food and body, specifically, and was more into life coaching because I found out, I found that working with people around their stressors was really much more important. It's like when you deal with the things you're trying to cope with, the coping strategies resolve themselves. And frankly, like overeating, emotionally eating, which has a negative connotation, but to me, emotional eating is totally normal and beautiful and natural. It's when we overuse this strategy to self-soothe, to comfort, you know, to regulate trauma. And what a brilliant tool that we chose as our younger selves to regulate ourselves and to soothe ourselves and to comfort ourselves and to give ourselves dopamine and love through food, which is can be a really beautiful like experience, right? So first I'll say, like, I'd say the first step is really understanding and accepting and loving why we choose these, what we feel like are unwanted behaviors, you know.
Mhm.
um I really hate the concept of food addiction. I think that to connect the word addiction to something that we need to survive is just a recipe for more cognitive dissonance and more pain and more trauma. I think that we can become addicted to certain coping strategies. And so eating food as a way to self-soothe or to cope with pain and trauma and stress can be one of the things in our toolbox. Let's not make it wrong entirely. Let's not try and throw it out the window, right? But the next step is, adding more tools to our toolbox. So meditation, breath work, nature connection, sex, like pleasure, self-pleasure, self-touch, all the things that can get us the oxytocin, the dopamine, right? That can help us down regulate our nervous system. I'm sure you have a ton of tools in your program that they can access, like I'm still learning those tools for myself. I call it the self-care toolbox. And it doesn't mean that you ever take food out of it. Food is a perfectly valid, lovely, beautiful tool that we can use. But if we give ourselves full permission, plus the presence of it. So this is what my mentor, Mark David, would call ritualizing a binge, for example. It's saying, I know that in this moment, what I would really like to do is comfort myself with mac and cheese. And I'm going to give myself full permission to do it. I don't care if it's not gluten-free. I don't care if it's not vegan. That shit's not doesn't taste good. That's not actually going to satisfy the craving. And then I'm going to end up binging later because I still didn't get what I wanted. So give myself what I want, because there's probably an inner child in there screaming around for that too, give myself full permission to have it and eat it with presence and savor it. Light a candle, do it in a beautiful way, ritualize it. And if you notice that you're feeling guilty about it, do what you can to throw that out the window too. Because then if you're feeling guilty, you're actually not in full permission, right? And what happens when we're not in full permission, I've realized recently, means that we are actually in a state of self-oppression. We are oppressing ourselves. We are telling ourselves, we're punishing ourselves, we're telling ourselves that we are wrong, we're not okay. So make this choice right. And it takes practice. That does not happen overnight. There, will be a part of you that's maybe always there, that's saying, that's wrong. You're not supposed to do that. I call it the diet monster whispering in the ear of my inner child, depending on whatever age she might be. I guess here's another tool. They're just going to come out as I riff. I've done a lot of work with like the combination of somatics with parts work, like internal family systems. So if there's a part of us that like getting to know which part of us wants this food. Is it our body? Can we feel it somatically? If I ask my body what I want right now, I could even check in right now and say, it's like showing me like a big green salad. I've not eaten enough greens in the last few days, right? So I want to go probably at lunchtime now and go get a really like yummy salad. I got off the plane from Ottawa a couple of weeks ago, and my friend who picked me up in Vancouver was like, okay, here's the two choices for food. We've got fried chicken, soul food, collard greens, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that sounds absolutely amazing. I can feel my mouth drooling when I think about it. Like some of my heart might feel really comforted by soul food that's been made with love, right? As I think about it. But when I tune into my belly, it feels heavy and awful. I'm like, I'm going to want to be in a massive coma afterwards, and I'm not going to make it to the ferry ride home, And then he goes, okay, well, there's a vegan bowl place that's really nourishing, and like has all sorts of choice. And I went, okay, that's actually what my body really wants right now, because I know I ate crap food on the plane and I need the energy. Not crap food because I need that to balance out the calories, because I'm supposed to make the healthy choice. No, because my body would not feel good without something nourishing. And I have a long day ahead of me. I was up for 24 hours that day, you know?
Wow.
And so this is the process for me. It's like, and so when I thought about the vegan food, it was like, I feel a lightness in my stomach and a fullness in my belly. I feel a warmth in my heart that's similar to the soul food, but a little different, you know, and I know that, and then I feel actually energized thinking about it instead of drained thinking about it. And that's how I decided to make that choice, you know? And
That's
so,
awesome. Can I just
yeah,
point out there the layers that you just went through?
yeah,
Because I think if we're trying to
they feel
figure
very
out like
natural to me. And people are like, whoa, how
that's
did you do that? Yeah,
no, it's brilliant because I think a lot of times, like, first of all, we don't know to ask ourselves in the first place. We
yeah,
just make our decisions based on, right, like, oh, more calories or less, or more nutrition or low density nutrition, these
yeah,
kind of outer fact things
yeah,
versus even to
yeah,
just ask that as an inner question. But you just took it another step deeper
yeah,
because
yeah,
if you just asked it once and you're like, about the soul food, like, ooh, that sounds amazing. You'd be like, check. All right, I answered. I
yeah,
got it. It feels like amazing. But
yeah,
you asked on a few different layers
I
there.
did.
And I think to me, I was kind of really getting a visual example of the kind of stepping down and into the somatic intuitive
Yeah,
part, if
yeah,
now that we have this term of
totally.
where is the whole answer or the weightier answer,
Yeah,
the more
yeah,
um the more true or real answer. And it doesn't mean that the other one didn't sound amazing or might not be the right answer on a different day when your needs
yeah,
are different or a different
yeah,
time of day.
yeah,
But you took it down and didn't just take the first answer. You kind of
yeah.
asked a little bit more and asked a little bit more and asked a little bit more. And I think
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
more we can practice that layering of questions, the
Yeah,
more, I think all of this, I was kind of like trying to open up this space of what is that somatic intuition when it relates to food? How do we, any of us who has a body that needs to feed us food, which is all of us, practice that? And I think you just exemplified it. We don't even have to
yeah.
ask how, because you just exemplified it just in that simple thing. And I want these concepts to be really
Yes,
simple,
yeah,
really accessible.
yeah,
You don't, I mean, sure, it does tie into things like, inner child and trauma. And like, there's all of these other
yeah.
nuanced
Well, I
things
can give
about
you a
it.
whole other layer of that, right? Is that I was coming off of a really intense week of taking care of my mom who was having surgery. And sure, the soul food probably would have been really comforting in
Hmm.
that moment to my inner child, to, uh, if I tune into it's probably like my teenage self. And, but really who came online to make that decision was my adult self.
Hmm.
Right. And that's so we get into internal family systems, meet somatics. When we do that, we can actually create some distinction between who's having the craving and who's making the decision.
Mm.
Right. um and my adult self, who's working on being reparented right now, right, and reparenting my inner selves, said, we know that that would taste really good, sweetie, and that would probably feel really good after like the heartbreak and the pain and the intensity of the week that you just had. And we want to feel good in our body so that we can actually make it home, and and not feel worse than we already do, you know
Yeah.
so to me, like, when I started working with internal family systems and being able to identify the parts that are showing up, you don't identify your entire self with the part of you that's having the craving. You can create some separation and you can have a conversation with yourself, and then you can reparent yourself, and sometimes your inner
Beautiful.
child might just be like, that's what I need, and you're going to give it to me. And if you don't, I'm going to throw a really big tantrum and it's going to cause so many other issues. And then you can just be like, you know what? I hear you. You can have this thing right now. Let's enjoy it. Right. And that's when you go into like a ritualized binge. It's like, because and you can trust yourself, if you don't have it in that moment, you're going to end up binging later on something else that's still not going to soothe you until you have the thing that you really want.
Mm.
And it may be that you need that because that trauma trigger was really big and you need some help riding it, and you did some big work you know, and now you deserve some pleasure. And if you can't source another source of pleasure or comfort in that moment, then you're going to be left feeling undernourished and depleted. Right? So just give yourself permission in those moments
Yeah.
to soothe.
That piece, that soothing, that's that presence piece, right? So I want you to
Yeah.
wrap it with, or bring us home with this, that
Sure.
because I think embodiment is a lot about finding where these signals are kind of like
Sure.
frayed nerve endings, loose ends, that processes that have started and not completed, this kind of coming home into our bodies. And what you just described is really figuring out what processes are going on
Mhm.
related to food, and meeting them when we can meet them in the moment, the real and true and biggest need in the moment. Then we don't have to have these unprocessed loops running all the time. And then when we go to ask ourselves those questions, like we don't know
Yeah.
which part to answer, because we have all of these unmet needs
Yeah.
from times when we haven't listened to them in the past. And so this is all so brilliant. And you guys, I hope that as Natalie begins to share more and more of this part, and kind of bring, I know your work along,
Yeah.
for as all of these years you've collected bits as you figured out your own health journey.
Yeah.
You've collected so many bits and pieces, so as they come together, you guys, I hope you follow Natalie. So Natalie, bring us one piece to kind of land on,
Mm.
is as far as embodiment and empowerment through a relationship with food. What is something based on what you've shared that we can kind of really land on, chew on, if you
Yeah.
will? And then where can people find you to stay with you on your journey?
Sure. Um, I'd say where I really started was through the lens of stress. Um, and disconnection from self, and relationship to food. It all comes back to what gives you energy and what takes it away.
Mm,
You know,
yes.
whew. That's there's a hit. Yeah, that's
Yes,
what I
I
needed
got
to
a
say. That
yes.
was it. What gives you energy and what takes it away, right? Um, and starting to attune to that as a decision making guide in everything in your life. Food, and doing this with food is actually really great practice for doing this with relationships, jobs, where do you want to live? I mean, that's how I ended up moving from LA to an island in the Gulf Islands in Western BC, where I'm surrounded by nature and community. And now I'm founding this integrative health center and bringing a team of people together to help people around their different, you know, layers of health issues because of all the support that I received along the way. And all of that was led initially by this question: what gives me energy and what takes it away? If I'm getting drained by this food, this person, this place, it's not good for me. And I just need to stop forcing myself to stick with this thing. You know, that could be true for a diet, a way of eating, you know, um, a movement. Like when you look at the science of adrenal fatigue, and I started to hear if you're drained after a workout, then you probably shouldn't have done it. If it gives you energy, then it's been good for you. And I went, what? That's mind blowing, you know? So it works every step of the way. And then to like slightly deeper, like in terms of just starting to like feel your body, just doing a body scan a few times a day, even right before you eat. This is how I started, probably, if I think back, right before I eat, what does my body want? If I'm looking at the menu, what's going to give me energy? What's going to take it away? What feels like a yes? What feels like a no?
Mm,
And notice where you're feeling that in your body. If you're feeling it in your head, you're probably filtering it through some sort of conditioning or should or shouldn't. But if you're feeling it in your body, yes, you can trust that. That's my perspective.
Love it.
Yeah. And so just learning how to do body scans in this moment. What do you notice? What do you feel? In this moment, my hands feel cold. My stomach is growling because I'm hungry. I feel a little, excitement in my heart. I feel a little anxiousness in my shoulders, just around what's happening in my day today. I feel really warm in my heart, connecting with Jessie and being able to share this story with all of you. Do that a few times a day, even if it's just noticing the sensation. Okay, one more thing that I learned so I also did a coaching training that I never completed, but that's okay. It taught me a lot with Layla Martin. It's called Vita Coaching Methodology, and it's a sex, love, and relationship coaching training. And we do this thing called the 5 senses meditation. In this moment, what are you noticing in all 5 of your senses? Your sight, the sound, your taste, smell, and touch. And if you practice that, even it's, first of all, it's a great way to get into mindfulness. It's a great way to lock a really important moment in your memory. And it's a really great way to just get present with your sensation and your felt sense in your body in any given moment. So
I love that. And that is a great place to bring it, because this whole the people who have learned from me have learned to tune into sensation and to use that information really intelligently. So you just made it through connected all of the dots. So that was absolutely perfect. Natalie, thank you so much. I am so grateful for our connection over these many years, and to both witness and be a part of your journey. And just, I send you so much love and gratitude. Where can people find you so they can stay in touch?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram at Natalie Baack. I don't do a whole lot of posting content anymore. It's just more posting from my life, but I am there and can be followed. And every once in a while we'll share if I have an offering, for sure. You can find me at nataliearianbach.com if you want to connect in with my website and see some of my offerings there and how to work with me. I'm actually currently not working one-on-one because I'm in the process of launching this integrative health center on Salt Spring, where actually I probably will be doing more of my work around this sort of thing. So stay tuned for offering. You could follow at Madrona Health on Instagram and Facebook as well to see what we're going to be offering there. My plan is to support, we have naturopathic doctors and counselors and acupuncturists, and I'm going to offer some, food and body support through the clinic to my community here, and potentially creating some online offerings there as well.
Beautiful. And at the very least, follow her for nature photos.
Yeah, there you go. And if you're somebody who's like, I really need to talk to you about this, reach out. Don't hesitate. Even if it's not something I'm actively doing in this very moment, I'm always happy to have a conversation, and I can always refer to somebody who might be able to support you if it's not something I'm available for. So.
Beautiful. I think sharing our stories and being there for each other is part of what allows for that permission and presence to become a normal thing. So thank you for offering your stories and your presence. I have so much gratitude. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into this very potent and powerful episode. If you want to learn what I call the 6th sense to tune into, your sense of proprioception, your kinesthetic sense, your body shape habits, mechanics, postural habits, movement habits, that kind of thing, that is my jam. At embodiedmovementtraining.com is where you will find that. And tune into the next episode of Conscious Body Conversations. Natalie, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Bye.